Salway from educator.com. What did I mean when I say Salway? Well, it turns out I'm using a word that has a term that maybe not everybody understands. This section, we're going to go over words and terms and what they mean, and hopefully that will help you understand reading very difficult material much better. So, here's a quick overview of what we're doing. I've done this before, you've heard this before. We're going to review how to do definitions from the context and how important that is. Then we're going to go over a real technical definition of what a word is and what a term is. They do not mean the same thing. Then finally, we're going to go over the many different ways you can find the most important terms and words that an author is using. So, definitions from context. We've gone over this before. Let's go one more time. One word has many definitions. So, before we left on the trip, he was sure to book a hotel for the night. In this reading course, you will read a non-fiction book. My favorite Firefly character is Shepherd Book. Book, book, book. All three of these mean something totally different, and the only way you would understand what the writer means is if you were paying attention to the surrounding sentence and the overall context. Hi, Shepherd Book. So, how can we find these definitions? Well, remember, context is always your best place to start. Well, unless it's very technical, then you need to go straight to the dictionary. But context is always helpful. How else is this word used? Does the writer define it for you? Don't be afraid to review those vocabulary lessons and figure out what those great Greek and Latin root words were to help you understand. And if you're reading something that's just dry and technical and the author just assumes that you know what a word like biology means or what a Tesla coil is or what, an inductive motor is, don't be afraid to go to the dictionary. Sometimes words are just technical. So, words versus terms. And to explain this and to explain how they're different, I have to explain a big problem with language. Words and terms aren't the same thing. And language is full of ambiguity. And what I mean is that it's kind of hazy and it's not always perfectly 100% clear. If it was 100% clear and totally unambiguous, we wouldn't need a reading course. And did you know that there have been people throughout history who have tried to invent languages that were 100% clear? And you could learn them, but then you'd only be able to talk to those kinds of people, and they're a little weird. So we're just better to just deal with ambiguous normal language than strange philosophical language by weird people. Now, when we say, look up a term, what we really mean is something like look up a definition. So words and terms are kind of two sides of the same coin, but a term is a definition, and it's a very special kind of definition, and I'll show you right now. A word, to start, is just any combination of letters that has a meaning. Book. Well, there are at least three definitions of book, though. Literature, Jabberwocky, record, literary alchemy. A term is a meaning that both the reader and the writer understand and agree on. It's this last part that makes terms really, really important. Remember, the writer is a pitcher, you are a catcher, and you have to work together. Part of working together is that you have to understand these terms the same way the author expresses them. And hopefully, if you've got a really good writer, they're going to help you do that. But if not, then you have to kind of infer what's the best way to answer this. So, here are some terms. Book is a character on the television show Firefly. He is a mysterious creature. What does it mean to record something? Well, it's the process of storing sound into a physical device for playback later. Hey, what's literary alchemy? I keep hearing about that. Is that new slang? No, it's a literary technique that involves the union of opposites into a positive, morally uplifting resolution. What's a Jabberwocky? Well, it turns out Jabberwocky just doesn't have any meaning at all, so maybe it's not actually a word. Now, one word can have several terms. So let's go back to our example of book. A character on a television show, Firefly. He is a mysterious preacher. What else does book mean? To reserve something like a hotel room, a plane ticket, or a similar travel-related item for a short period of time. What else does a book mean? A unified work of writing, frequently bound between a back cover and a front cover. One term can be referred to with several words. Here it goes. Here's our term. Right there. Who is he? Well, he's that preacher guy. He's the chaplain of pirates, or sometimes people just refer to him as the shepherd. Now, you've already understand why language is ambiguous. We have one word that can have several terms, and we can have a term that can be referred to with several words. And sometimes that makes language confusing. But it doesn't have to be that way. There are ways to figure out which words are important and which terms you need to understand. So, if a word is unfamiliar to you, or if it's giving you trouble, it's probably has an important term that you need to understand. Let's read this. Principles are not innate, unless the ideas be innate. Had those who would persuade us that there are innate principles, not taken altogether gross, but considered separately from the parts which those propositions are made out of, they would not perhaps be forwarded to believe that they were innate. Okay. This is a long opening passage too. Pretty dense writing. And it was writing that was written hundreds of years ago when people normally had different vocabularies. I'm not 100% sure what innate means here. And if you weren't either, then what you would have to do is just kind of highlight it like I did and pay attention to how the author is using it. And then you will understand that word better. Another way to know if a word is applying to a certain term is if the author spends a lot of time explaining it. So here is a passage from This Is Your Brain on Music. This book derives a neurophysiological perspective on how music affects our brains, our minds, our thoughts, and our spirit. But first, it is helpful to examine what music is made out of. What are the fundamental building blocks of music, and how are they organized and give rise to music? The basic elements are loudness, pitch, contour, duration, tempo. Okay, so Daniel here is giving us a great technical, strong definition of what he means when he says music. He's probably going to spend a lot of time talking about this because it's in the title of his book, and you can bet you're going to be hearing about that again and again and again. Here's another example. Alchemy, in a nutshell, is a science of perfection or the sanctification of the alchemist's soul. Where's this coming from? It's coming from the Deathly Hallows lecture, so it's going to be talking about old stuff for a little bit. The heroic venture is all but impossible today, mainly because of the way we look at reality. Unlike medieval alchemists, okay, so this is the beginning of a passage, and our author here, John Granger, is saying alchemy, in a nutshell, which is a way of saying, in a very short, concise definition, it's talking about the alchemist's soul. Now, if this author is spending a lot of time defining what alchemy is, he really does want you to understand the term. And please read carefully, highlight, circle, paraphrase, notes, whatever you have to do to understand what that is, because it's important to the author, and it's probably important to the rest of the book. Another way that you can figure out which words and terms are important is if you get typographical devices. So here we go. The phrase tabula rasa, in quotation marks, translates as blank slate from Latin. So the author here is explaining that this term right here, tabula rasa, is probably something pretty important. And you can see kind of here he goes on, he talks about John Locke, and describe how our mind was at birth. He's going to give you a definition of this. But first off, as soon as you see those quotation marks around a term, a word, know what the term is because it's important. Here's another great example. We have a long paragraph here, and then finally, at the very bottom, we have our word in italics. This is another typographical device, like quotation marks, that's letting you know that this word here, scientific paradigm, has very, very important terms that you would need to understand if you're going to continue on reading the book. So make sure you understand what these italicized words are and the quotation mark words are. And finally, if you're reading something that's very technical and it's using the subject's vocabulary, don't be afraid to go straight to a dictionary. But know when you're reading a technical word. The Tesla coil transformer operates in a significantly different fashion from a conventional, i.e. non-iron core, transformer. The conventional transformer, so on and so on and so forth. I'm not sure what the transformer is in this context, but I do know that the subject is all about the history of electricity. So, I can bet that this transformer is not an Autobot or a Decepticon, but it's probably some technical word that I would have to look up in a dictionary or maybe do a little research on Wikipedia to understand what an electrical transformer is. And then I could just keep on reading this, knowing the term for transformer here. So, the assignment wrap-up is just this. First off, remember, terms are meanings that the writer and the author understand together. Not just definitions, because it becomes a term when you understand it too. If a word gives you trouble and you're confused about what it means, that is an important word. Do your best to understand what it means as slowly as you can. Pay attention closely when an author explains a word, especially if they dedicate entire chapters to the word or phrase. That will help you read the rest of the book much, much easier. Watch for those typography symbols, the italics, underlines, quotation marks. That means the author wants you to understand that that is important. And again, if you're running into a technical term over and over and over again, and you're still not sure what the definition is, go to a dictionary, do a little research, and that will help you understand it. There is no assignment for this lecture, but it has been kind of an important one, and I just want you to understand how to figure out what the terms are for these words that sometimes confuse you. So, please be sure to use all these skills, and thanks for using Educator.